Recording in progress.
You're all set.
Thank you, Jordan. Good morning, everybody. It is May 6th, Tuesday, about 9:05 a.m., and this is the meeting for the Downtown Facilities Special Committee, and I'm calling the meeting to order. Were there any changes to the agenda? None commented. Any public comment? Moving right along. Can I get somebody to motion for the approval of the minutes of March 4th, 2025? Annie, second by Greg. All in favor? Thanks. I don't have a chair's report there other than this, a lot's going to happen today because we haven't met in 2 months, and looking forward to that. We'll move on to County Administration, Corsa Kumfi, and we talk about department relocation update.
Thank you very much. And there's a lot of moving pieces and moving parts, and nothing cast in stone yet. So one of the key things that we've been looking at is which are the departments that will have to relocate to make way for the decommissioning of the buildings on the site. So we now have Board of Elections, assessment, and also IT. So these are the departments that will require relocation from the site to make for the deconstruction. They're currently 5th floor of the mental health building, which is vacant. And also we are looking to lease some spaces to accommodate that move. There's a vacancy at the TC3 building, Annex. And we're also looking at other places that we'll be able to find space to determine how the relocation will be functional. So in terms of the Board of Election, require a bigger decision points in terms of their space use, and also right now with where their election materials are stored, the lease is up, so we have to consider everything in totality in making those decisions. So where we land with programmatically to make it functional will determine on some of the decisions you make in terms of the next steps with the project. So we in administration is working with facilities to identify spaces that we can relocate into, and then based on the broader decision points, we'll be able to move forward with our approach. So we've identified the spaces that can be utilized, and as soon as the decisions are made and we are clear in the direction that we're moving forward with, we will start having negotiations with those spaces. We haven't had any conversations, actual negotiations yet. We're waiting for those decision points so that we can start those negotiations. But we have identified spaces that can accommodate any changes that, or any relocation that we need to undertake to make way for the decommissioning of the buildings.
Any questions? Annie?
Thank you for that update, Corsa. So it sounds like we have room in some places, but we might have to rent.
Yes.
Still? Okay. Thank you.
Corsa, on the Annex C building over here, is the plan to deconstruct that building at the same time we're deconstructing the other buildings, or do we have a year to think about that, or what's the thought on that?
I think I'll pivot that to Ariel and the team in terms of what will be the ideal process to go through with that.
We'd prefer to do it at the same time, not that we would deconstruct all three concurrently, but that we would start most likely with, let's say, the professional building, 308, Key Bank, and then go into the building C. We would do we've already started testing for hazardous building materials. We've done 2 of the buildings. The next one is scheduled soon, and also they're going to be starting design. So those phases will be done concurrently. As far as the deconstruction, we're probably early fall away from even starting that, because we've got to go through the testing and the design phases. But yes, to answer your question, we would like to do them at the same time. but most likely we're going to do them sequentially, which means that most likely we wouldn't get to building C till either end of this year or early next year.
Okay. Any more questions on relocation? Guess that was pretty quick. Thanks for your work on that.
Thank you.
And we're going to move right on to Whole Architects and all the work they've been doing. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. I'm sure you guys have been busy. The first discussion point is the State Historic Preservation Office SHPO deconstruction update.
Yeah, remember the microphones.
Yes,
And
thank you.
state your name when you first start, too.
You want me to take this one? You can do it. Yeah. Okay, can you pull the slide up? Yeah, so the process with the State Preservation Office has gone much more smoothly than we anticipated, actually. I'm going to talk a little bit about the sort of the process that we went through, and then we'll speak to a little bit of detail in terms of how it went. So I think we started, when we met with you last time, we were just sort of beginning that process. We were working with a preservation architect, Elise Johnson-Schmidt, out of Corning. So she led us through sort of the expectations that SHPO would want to hear and understand about the building. We went through an exhaustive sort of analysis, looking at 6 different options that I want to sort of talk about in a little bit more detail. But looking big picture, essentially the process was we submitted a report, a fairly large report to SHPO. They spent about 3 weeks reviewing it, and then we met on site. Arel and Elise and I sort of toured 3 representatives from SHPO through all 3 buildings, so they could sort of see firsthand what those buildings looked like. And then I think Katie and Megan and Kim Michaels from Trowbridge Wolf Michaels joined us for a meeting in this chamber with SHPO to sort of then talk about our report, answer any questions they have. And at the outcome of that meeting, SHPO was basically supporting our recommendation that it made sense for the 3 buildings to be decommissioned and deconstructed and a new building to be built. On the screen right now is sort of a 1-page matrix of summary of the entire report. Yeah, I can use the mouse to help. So I just want to zoom in on the top for a second. These were the 6 variables that we looked at. We looked at just simply keeping the 3 existing buildings and renovating them as an option. We looked at building 2 options that built a new building between all 3 of the existing buildings, so keep the 3 buildings on site and build between them and around them. We looked at 1 option that deconstructed 2 of the buildings but kept 300 North Tioga and then built a new structure around just the existing bank. And then, of course, we looked at the option of deconstructing all 3 buildings and building a new building. And then the final option that we looked at and spoke to SHPO about was the option of building a new building outside of the city limits. So preserving the 3 buildings, it was unclear, like maybe the 3 buildings would be sold, what would happen with the existing 3 buildings, but the county project would move out of Ithaca. And then the criteria that we looked at and discussed with SHPO is much of the same criteria of the, the goals that the county has been talking about the project. And you can sort of see how each of the goals that we had for the project related to each of the options, just in generic terms. But we looked at, the equity of square footage. Like, are we providing each department with, equal and quality space? What's the flexibility of the project to accommodate change over time? Some of the challenges there were, in these smaller historic or older buildings, there's not as much square footage to adopt. Like, we can fit 1.5 departments, but you can't put 1.5 departments in a building. So, as departments change over time, it was harder to accommodate those buildings in some of the smaller structures. Security, the benefits of, 1 main entrance and 1 point of security for the project. Compliance with New York State Building Code was looked at. Meeting the county capital budget for the project is something that, we didn't think SHPO would have a lot of interest or respect for, but they actually recognized that, wow, it's going to be a lot more expensive for you to renovate all 3 of these buildings and then also build, a new structure around them. We looked at the structural challenges of building around historic buildings. Another big factor that SHPO was interested in was maintaining and enhancing the downtown community vitality. So this is preserving the vitality of the historic district, but also preserving the vitality of downtown Ithaca. And you can see that obviously scored strongly, in all these categories except the relocate out of town. The green represents, sort of a good score, yellow, moderate, and red, poor score in that category, or for that option. Meets the parking requirements. So, if we preserve the 3 buildings, we're taking up a much larger footprint on the site. It makes it harder to find parking on site. Access to public transportation, walking and biking, obviously very strong. Anything we do downtown, right at a central public transportation hub. When we get out of town, that got a little bit harder. ADA compliance was considered in this decision of SHPO. The clarity of entrances and wayfinding around the building or buildings, if it was a complex, how you get in. Sustainable performance and high performance building was considered, access to natural light. Preserves contributing buildings to the historic district was measured. So this was obviously one that if we tear down buildings, this one gets a poor score. This is probably the one point that tearing down all 3 buildings and building a new building did get a poor score on, because it does sacrifice all 3 of those buildings. However, conforming with the historic district massing and the historic district building materials and aesthetics, the 3 existing contributing buildings weren't doing as well at those goals as if we built a new structure. It can conform a lot more to massing and some of the requirements of the district. And then longevity and finishes of materials. So when we sat down with SHPO and sort of reviewed the whole context of the project, all the variables that we were trying to achieve for the county, by the end of the meeting, they actually agreed with us, and they were in concurrence that, like, in this specific situation, they were supporting us deconstructing the 3 buildings. It came with a list of mitigating measures, they call them. These mitigating measures weren't anything that we weren't already planning to consider for the construction of the new building. They obviously want these 3 buildings sort of recorded with, drawings and photographs. They want us to consider creating, some type of historic component in the new building that, talks about the existence of these 3 buildings and sort of records some of that. So we're working right now with SHPO to sort of negotiate what the mitigating measures are going to be for the project, and that'll continue to be defined, as we design the project. But we have basically the verbal approval from SHPO, and we're in the process of finalizing the letter of recommendations, what they call it. So that'll be a little bit collaborative over the next couple months, probably. Questions on preservation?
Any questions, anybody? Any?
Yeah, just glad to see the process going a little faster than all of us, I think, anticipated. So that's
Yeah. Good. I think Arel was probably the most optimistic through the whole process. We were trying to be optimistic but not naive, but we hit Arel's target.
And then just procedural, so this wasn't in our agenda packet. I don't know if this was ready a week ahead of time, but it's preferable if we could get things into our agenda packet. It's easier for us to have time to mull it over, and also transparency for the community. But can we have this in the minutes then afterwards? Okay, thank you. We don't want people to, we want to have time to think about it, but we don't want the public to ever think, this is pretty straightforward, but to ever think that we're blindsiding them or doing things, behind.
Understood.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think it helped that the Planning Sustainability Department actually started meeting with SHPO probably a year ago now, roughly. So
Yeah.
I think you warmed them up, so I appreciate for doing that and for following up on that. When do you hope to get a written approval for this, to deconstruct the buildings?
When do we hope? We would love to see it in the next few months, but in the next few weeks, but it might be in the next few months.
Okay.
There's some signatures that we're waiting for. We never know when we're working with the state.
Right, I hear you. Okay.
Randy, is
Mike?
that, when they get the letter, is that the signal we can go ahead and start the deconstruction?
Technically, yeah, we've already started the the design for the deconstruction and and sort of figuring out the process. It looks like Megan has something to share.
Megan, go ahead.
Right, so some of the mitigation measures are going to need the buildings to still be there to complete. So although the letter itself, kind of the finalization might take a little time, what we can be doing, so we're not losing any time in the meanwhile, is actually, we've already been working on some of those mitigation measures, kind of anticipating them when we've had opportunities, like the Cornell class that wanted to measure and document one of the buildings, those sorts of opportunities. So although I don't think we can start deconstruction immediately, because we need to have the buildings there for some of the drawings and photographs and things that need to be done, I think, so we can be kind of, I think, shuffling this along in the meanwhile. So.
But couldn't those things start right now?
Yeah, and some of them
Yeah.
actually have been underway in anticipation, long before this, so.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as I explained earlier, we can still move forward with the testing, which we have, also with the abatement design. So the testing that is occurring is to determine the hazardous building materials that exist in the buildings, and based on the age of the buildings, we know, and visually we've seen asbestos, there's lead paint, there's probably PCBs in the caulking. So all three buildings, well, buildings seem much, much less because we've abated that over the years during renovations, but at least 300, 308. So all of that is going to be occurring, and then we do the abatement design, then we do the deconstruction design. So that's going to be several months, probably 2 to 3 months. So we're moving forward with that, and our hope is that within that time frame, we will get that letter of recommendation, mitigation measures agreed, and all the signatures as required, and then allow us to move forward with deconstruction.
Okay, deconstruction discussion is on our agenda, so we jumped right into that already. Do anybody more questions on deconstruction at all?
I can talk a little bit more about where we are in the scheduling and process for that. So we kicked off the deconstruction.
About 4 inches from the mic.
Hello? Okay. So we kicked off the deconstruction by going over there and doing full Matterport scans, which is a 3D scan of the interior of the building, and we started to model all three buildings. This allows us in deconstruction. The Matterport is like a 3D visual image of it. So we can actually go in during discussions and say, an item wants to be salvaged while looking through that first. So we've set that up. We have the models in place. We are also meeting next week. Let me verify the date.
Yes.
Yeah, next week we are meeting with Felix from up at Cornell that has had some involvement, and Anthony from Finger Lakes Reuse. And we're going to sit down with them and talk about our options locally for salvage and reuse, and how much of that we think we can get out of this building to take deconstruction as far as we can. So that process is started now. The plans are, as we move forward, to kick off the to kick it off with the full team, and then we will start finishing all of the hazmat testing, coming in and doing the structural evaluation and everything. So that would be our next step, and that will follow right up with the meeting with the salvage groups.
We actually had a presentation from the Recycling and Material Management on deconstruction at our facilities meeting last month. And did you guys get a copy of that? We should share that with them if they haven't.
Yes.
got
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
Not that it changes anything, but just kind of how we understand it.
It actually, it is pretty much in that mold. That's kind of the outline for the process we're going through right now. So that was great. I watched it and have the printed copy of that. So we are following a very similar model as we move forward.
Any more questions on deconstruction, anybody? My only thought is that, you know, it's a timeline, right? So the timeline moves, it could be late fall, winter when we're doing deconstruction if we get to that point. Is that an issue for anybody as far as if it moves a couple of months? Is deconstruction in the winter time a problem, or, I mean, you're talking a period of time. So I'm just, what's your goal, I guess, to start deconstruction? And I realize we don't need any permission from the city to do that. But we want to make sure that we're, you know, informing them of what we're doing.
Yeah, so schedule-wise, we are looking for the deconstruction to start in September, finish February of 26, and with a grace period in there for salvage, that people could have time to come in and remove items from within the building. And we expect that to last 3 to 4 weeks. That's tentative right now, but a period before the deconstruction starts for that.
Any more questions? Great, thank you. There is a report discussion on the Center Go project schedule update. We just saw, do we need to do that, or would you like to jump into that, or?
I have a few items to cover if you,
Are we still pretty much in schedule with what we looked at a few months ago? Nothing's changed, I don't think.
We are still in schedule. The update would only be items that we have started or in progress.
Right. Yeah, I think you're pretty much on schedule.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. The next thing we have on here is parking needs and studies you guys have done.
All right. So with parking and traffic study, the data was collected. The data was collected by Fisher. They were out here for 2 days in a row. They studied the traffic patterns. They studied the parking along those streets, also with the State Street and Green Street parking garages. They returned the next day for peak hours to watch the traffic loads. I believe it's 7 to 9 in the morning and 4 to 6 in the evening. So they tracked all of the intersections and the traffic that was in there. And again, updated the parking, you know, what they saw for parking in the area. Their next step is to pull this together, but really this will be ongoing throughout the whole schematic design process. So they will give us initial information as we start to lay out the parking and take a look at that, and they'll develop that throughout. So there's no ending to that report, so to speak, until we're through schematic design and reviewing the parking options that we have with you.
Any questions on that? Anybody? What about parking for constituents, for people coming to visit? How are you analyzing that? How much parking we need for people that are coming to our building?
So, you know, at this point, we do have just the, on approvals shortly, we'll have an actual count of employees. And then we're also following up on public. So part of our program verification phase was to get information from each of the departments on numbers of visitors, you know, roughly, and project that as the starting point. But as this continues and the building develops, that parking will go in tandem with it. So, you know, SD, we're in for the schematic design for that new building. We have not started yet. So the evaluation there is in early. We have both that and the survey right now currently in process. So when we kick off schematic design, we're ready to evaluate it. As we get down the road, I'll bring in Fisher to talk more about the specific parking and what the evaluations mean, and then trying to incorporate it. At this point, not knowing the location or size of the building on the site, it is difficult to determine how much parking we have right there on site and then how much additional we would need.
Annie?
Thank you. Just wondering, would it, as part of the process, will maybe a more in-depth survey be done on, I mean, I'm not an expert at it, of course, but, you know, like say, at the clerk's office or COFA or, you know, any of the ones, you know, like to have a little survey there, whether they fill it out, you know, there's 3 buttons or something that, or I, you know, I don't know if it would take more staff time to be able to ask them, but some way to track, you know, when people are coming in, you know, how did you get here? You know, bus, walk, bicycle, car, you know, things like that.
Yeah, so in our original questionnaire, all of those, the walk-in traffic, bike traffic, and public traffic parking, also accessible issues that they have to address and a volume there. So they gave us initial idea of what that is. Tracking it moving forward throughout this process would be, that would help a lot to
But who
that.
gave you? The departments?
Yeah, each of the departments, I'm sorry, in our program verification, that was there was a questionnaire in there that discussed all of the parking, number of visitors and that. So we have a rough idea based on their knowledge of it. As we move forward,
Right.
we'll have to do a deeper evaluation because we are
Okay.
putting more people in one location instead of spread out, and that could impact some of that.
Okay, just wondering if we're getting, you know, are they really tracking it? Nothing bad about our departments, but, you know, do they really know? You know, are they asking people? I'm not sure.
Yeah, at this point, I think it was an initial response.
Like a guesstimate.
Like a rough idea, yeah, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
Thinking back to when we built the Human Services Building, we had a parking study done for that a long time ago, and we ended up having to secure 2 parking lots, which we still have, which were necessary, and plus the one at the building itself. We have the land on Tioga Street, what's left of it. We shot ourselves in the foot by the majority of the legislature approving the sale of the Sears Street property. But I just hope that, you know, that's taken into account, and I can see nothing but increased need for parking in the future. And when we did the parking study for the Human Services Building, they did windshield surveys of the streets to see how many parking spots were available. And that was helpful, except that you're not going to get a whole lot of customers who are going to be walking 3 or 4 blocks to get to the building.
Right.
Yeah, I think part of this evaluation includes on-site parking, and then as that is developed, whether there is under-building parking or just flat off-site parking, which could be owned by you, but be off-site parking, and street parking. Now, street parking is going to be limited in that area. We've already seen from the initial study, but all of those factors will go into it when we determine, as we move forward, whether it has to be part of the building, we have enough off-site or that.
And of course, the Seneca Street ramp is filled now, and a lot of those spaces have been given away by the city to the hotels, so that's really not going to be much of an option.
Okay, moving right along. We're up to departmental space program update.
Can I ask one question that's
Yeah.
not on the list here? Because I saw you're going to be doing an investigation about the utility access for this property. I get water and sewer, I assume, and gas and electric and everything like that. And is that ongoing, or when does we hear about that one?
That hasn't started yet.
Correct. It has not started yet. They want to complete the survey and the research associated with that, verifying boundaries and that level. And it will pick up as soon as we are at the point where the survey is pulled together. So that'll also be with TG Miller, and their process is to stack that. They'll probably get an earlier start than before the final survey is there, because as soon as they feel the data is in place. But they went out and surveyed on the 22nd, April 22nd. They surveyed the property. Now they're taking that back and they're mapping it and creating digital files and that. So as soon as they get all their mapping in, the next step for them would to start reaching out.
But they'll be working with the city to say, what the city plans are and things like that, so that we're not overflowing our sewer lines or things like that.
Yes, exactly.
I read something that any building that is under 7 stories can no longer have natural gas. Is there a law related to that, or maybe I read something wrong?
I'm not aware of that.
I thought sure it was a New York State law of some sort where any building under certain stories no longer. So Terry Carroll can clear me up.
Yeah, this was part of the vision that was in the CLCPA, and they're trying to build it into the energy code, but it's only for certain classes of buildings, and so we'd have to see if this would be one of the buildings that would fall under that. But it's supposed to start, I think, in 2026 development, and then I think there's another, in 2029, it changes in an additional class of building types gets also involved where they can't have natural gas in their construction, except for emergency purposes. And that's the intention for this building anyways, so.
Right.
So, but there would have to be natural gas for the backup for the generator, right?
Yeah, that's an allowed exemption to that, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah.
So I did read it right, so good. We're still on Department Space Program updates, or anything more on that, or?
Yeah, actually, I will walk through that now. Keep it in mind that this is all tentative. These were ideas that were moved around to create efficient spaces, use the existing buildings efficiently that are remaining, and try to minimize the impact of the new building and decrease the square footage and cost for that as much as we could. So the reorganization that is slightly different from what we've seen before. So this is a summary for what the changes are. I'm going to start with the new building. So in the new building, 1 through 11 has not changed. All of those programs were going in the new building originally. We have IT, CTC, and planning and sustainability moving into this building, into the new building. And moving workforce, the DOL and WD into the old jail. So basically, they would take up the entire old jail and only the additional assigned counsel would go in that building also. So they would be taken over that building. They were originally in the new. The legislature offices that were now, there's no change there. That was what the original program was calling for.
So did that have the first floor of this building being empty or being used for something else?
Legislature offices.
Right. Vacating the first floor, planning sustainability would go to the center of government, and then we would renovate that first floor for additional legislature space, including executive session space.
That seems excessive to me, but all right, go ahead.
I just want to say, if you have a couple of office spaces down there and some meeting room, even just one meeting room pretty much uses up that whole space down there.
Okay.
So yeah, we've got some floor.
On the screen now is the tentative layout. So we did test fits in the existing buildings to see see how it would work out, how the program would fit into each of them. So this one here is this building here. The first floor would get banks of offices on the perimeter walls at the windows. Yep. So it would have the banks of the offices on the perimeter, and then a large conference executive chambers in the middle. And this was the most efficient because of the columns that we have in here. We have a large number of columns in here. So pushing the conference to the outside wall would not make it the most efficient space. But now we have kind of this racetrack that moves around it for access. So that would be the first floor. Up here on the floor that we're on currently, the spaces behind you, the offices behind you.
So it said basement, but maybe that was just the way you were zoomed in?
What's that?
It had the word basement over.
Yeah, basement was just above it.
But that was not the basement, that was the first floor?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So this one, we would remove these offices and restore it back to what it was now that they have a new location on the first floor that would allow more space for the public. We would maintain everything from that perimeter wall here. All of this would be maintained. So this could be another office on the top, but all of this would go back into very similar to what we have on the opposite side of the room. The only thing that we're looking at in the basement here under this project would be adding a lactation room near the toilet rooms down there.
So this is a concept, as Bernard indicated. We were doing test fits just to make sure that there was enough space on the first floor. Whether we use all of the first floor for additional legislature space or not, that's really up to legislature office department. We have heard over the years, and the reason that we put these offices here is that all we had to work with 12 years ago was this second floor. So we had to provide legislature chambers and offices for staff and for legislature. So that's why we put these in here. I know legislators back then didn't like that fact, but we had no other option. And so to either provide additional space for public seating, which is really limited to this side, that's one option. We can leave this here and take up less space downstairs, and the balance of this space could be a publicly accessible meeting space, like we used to have at the old jail or other buildings in the past. So that's an option. So don't get too stuck on that floor plan. As I said, it was a concept, more of a test fit to see if space-wise that could work. And it works, and if you like it, we could develop it further. But at this point, we just wanted to make sure that it would work.
Yes, and keep in mind that this was, like you said, test fits. We will meet with the end users, the user groups, and we will sit down with them as we go through each department. Currently, we've met with all of them for program to make sure that they have the spaces they need, additional spaces they don't currently have, but also future growth. That's built into the program. So the next steps would be sitting down with each department and making sure adjacencies and spaces are within there, and that would kick off schematic design. So what we have here, I'm going to show you. This would be, I mentioned the workforce would pretty much move into the old jail. The blue area is workforce over those floors. Again, this was just to make sure the square footage fit. This wouldn't be the final layout. And then assigned council would be on the third floor. This provides a little bit more space than what they had in the program originally, some additional conference space, but it is very minimal. It is a really close fit to the program. So that's why this department moved over there. One, so there would be a location for this that they could go to, and it's pretty much the majority of the building, and two, their program fit square footage wise and everything into the space.
For workforce development, is that more space than they currently have or about the same? Or?
It is, there was a slight growth in workforce development because they combined the two departments, first of all. So it's hard, it's not apples to apples when we go back and look. But yeah, they've had slight growth. I would say 50% of the departments had slight growth. And when I say that, it's a couple hundred square feet maybe. And then some of them have reduced. So as we evaluated this and went through the process with them and Orel and Corsa, determination of what that future growth is, all the thought would be for flexibility, that as one may shrink, another one could grow into that space, and we're looking at that at the next steps. We just did preliminary study of that to see how that works. So the whole goal here is just to make a flexible office building when we move to the new building that allows those departments to grow and shrink, and we're locating them based on a lot of that. So overall, this new plan, if I can go back to that, this chart here, the building has decreased the new building has decreased around 8,000 square foot based from the original. And that was by moving 2 large departments out. One was the workforce, which we had room for. In the original plan, pretty much the old jail was maybe 30% utilized at the end of the projects. And currently it would be 100% utilized, or 98%. Yes.
Greg?
How much extra space is it at 39,000 square feet? Like space for growth?
Oh, all right. So the growth is built within each of these individual line items. There's growth for each department based on from the original studies through the 2022 study to now, and the expected growth as in positions they may be hiring shortly. So each of these departments has that built right into the program. And then at the end, there is, if you look way down here at the bottom, it says shared program spaces. And we have like almost 14,000 square foot there. So that's elevator cores, lobbies, but it also includes any adjustments that we need to make to individual departments, because the move in here in 29, the departments could shift in that time as we're developing it.
Mike?
It does seem to me that if we're going to be making the renovations to the old jail, that we should be getting the boilers out of there. And I don't know whether that would give us any extra floor space for offices in the future, or what could be done with that. But to have them taking up space doesn't make a lot of sense.
We had not factored that in there. I think we will explore it. We could do it when we're looking at bids. We call them add alternates. We do an alternate for them to price the removal of that. I mean, at least what we've shown for the old jail earlier, that floor plan. Let's see, the first floor. If you could zoom in that first floor, that hatched area on the left, and there's a note there, must lower this floor. So when the building was renovated in the early 90s, the other floors were dropped because they were stepped, except for this floor. And the reason that floor, the first floor, was not dropped to keep it at the same elevation with everything on the right there was because the boilers were active back then, and you didn't have enough clearance. Not clearance that you would hit the boiler, but just the heat from the top of the boilers. So we can drop that floor and still be above the boiler. We would have to reprice the removal of the boilers because although we abated most everything, there is still some asbestos within the boiler because it's sectional. You'd have to take it in sections, so that's where it gets expensive. And then you'd have to cut it up just to get it out. It won't fit through the doors. So, I mean, I think we can get the money for it. I mean, really without spending a lot of money, it would be very difficult to finish that because it's not the same elevation as the basement floor level, just adjacent to it. So you'd have to build it up. I think if anything, we could use it for additional mechanical room space, for storage, things of that nature. but for usable space, it would be very expensive to do that. But it would be worth exploring to see how much more.
Well, I know I think at one point you said sometimes you get better prices if you've got a contractor doing
Correct.
a whole bunch of things at one time.
Correct.
And the longer those sit there, the more expensive they are to get out.
Exactly. Yeah.
When we're doing the feasibility study for the downtown, or for the geothermal ground loop, the district thermal, that was also a potential spot that we looked at for hosting the mechanicals for that. So it would be replacing the boilers there with the mechanicals for the future system. So.
That's correct.
But you still got to get them out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So more of a reason to get them out now. Yeah.
So, I mean, what we've shown you so far are recommendations, and if the committee agrees, then we would then further that with further discussions with the departments, but these are our recommendations from looking at the space needs and better utilization of the existing buildings once they're vacated with other departments.
Yeah, I'll just add that these recommendations sort of came with two main goals that we had as we were thinking about this. One was cost. I mean, if we have space available rather than building new space. But the other was utilization. We didn't want to leave the county at the end of this project with a building that they owned that was, really underutilized. So there was an opportunity to save cost and make sure that we, at the end of the project, like, why did you build all this new square footage and you have all this square footage that isn't utilized? We wanted to sort of make sure we had thought that through fully.
Could you blow up the new building department again, so I can, is there a department that was planned in the new building that's not in there now?
Oh, yes, it is. So the ones that moved were the workforce that we just looked at in the old jail, and the other is Board of Elections. So the difficulty...
Can you show the whole page, please? Did we get this ahead of time, this one?
Yeah, Jordan, if we could get copies of all these things, we appreciate it. And we share it with other legislators as well.
Yeah, I hate to be a pain, but I have asked this before from you guys. So we really need this stuff ahead of time, please. Thank you.
I think the reason that we withheld some of it, because initially there was discussion that this would be not in public session, and because of that.
Well, for this one, but then for the other things you've presented, two other things you've presented too could have been in our agenda packet. Thank
Well,
you.
the schedule should have been there.
The schedule was the only thing that was there.
Right.
Yeah, and part of this too, these are recommendations and discussions. No decisions are being made right now, so I think we're okay moving forward.
Yes. All right, and the other program that moved from the new building you asked about was Board of Elections. So the difficulty we found with Board of Elections, while sitting with them and walking through the options, are the need to be on the first floor and to be adjacent to the storage for all the machines. This is a really large program that would take up 3/4 of the first floor. And we have a lot of public-facing departments, and we would like to get more of that on the first floor for convenience. So as we shuffled this around, it was actually first brought up by the Board of Elections group while we were meeting with them, of possible alternative locations. So what we're looking at here is, with COFA going in a new building, which was always the plan, to work on the Human Services Annex and move the whole Board of Elections program, their offices and storage together. So that is what we're showing down here at item number 4. So that again was one of those items that we did test fits on. Their program didn't match up 100%. There was slightly less space at the annex, but as we went through that, we're very close in the test fits show they got what they needed from the program, even if the number isn't exact.
What percentage of the Board of Elections needs are from the machinery itself?
What's the...
Because it seems pretty small over there now, so I'm just...
Well, they're leasing 3,200 square feet, so it's about half of that total number that is up on Hanshaw Road, which is their training and their voting machine storage. But we're leasing 3,200, and of that, if you net out, they've got mechanical spaces, bathrooms, other really non-usable space, but they're paying for it. That's why we felt the test fit in the Board of Elections would work well. I think you had, we did a test fit at the Human Services Annex, and the test fit works. So the purple is really their departmental gross square footage. All that other space is not included, but it still supports their space. So we feel that there's more than adequate space for combining both their offices and the voting machine storage and training. And also efficiencies by combining the two, where they could have one conference room instead of two, as they currently do, and be able to be more efficient in their space usage. So test fit works really well.
Thank you. Greg?
A big fan of the Board of Elections, big supporter of the work that they do, but also a big fan of the opportunity that exists with the Human Service Annex and Block 14 and what could the possibilities be. I think this is a waste, personally, of some prime dirt and space in the core of the city that is begging for more. And I just think this is a poor use. And so I think from a planning perspective, I'm not okay with this. But that's just my personal opinion, and I'm one of 14. But I think flat buildings, there's like surface parking. It's not a good idea in the downtown core. So hopefully we can figure out another solution. I know that this makes sense. I know that this is ideal, but I don't actually think it's as ideal in the big picture in the long run, from what this committee's already discussed with that space.
And one other thing that we talked about, as Ariel said, this is a test fit. The alternative would be to either buy or lease a different space for Board of Elections. Based on everything we looked at, they will not fit in the center of government as long as we want to have that atrium that people can actually come in with a welcoming space at the ground floor or the center of government. So the alternative would be to look for a space to procure to be used for the Board of Election needs. I talked about one or two spaces that can be an alternative, but based on your directions, we'll be able to move into that space to look and identify and also work on getting the space.
Annie?
So does that, regarding, it doesn't fit with if the atrium's on the first floor, the welcome area, and where you direct people to, to different departments and things like that. I mean, that makes sense to have that there. So is it because it doesn't fit because of their storage? Is getting the equipment in and out of there?
That's one factor. That's one factor, and also the size that they were asking for or they need to be able to be occupied. As indicated earlier, they're looking at maybe 3/4 of the whole space for the Board of Elections if you want to provide them with that access to the center of government first floor.
They would need 3/4 of the first floor.
Yes.
And we'd rather, and they need to be on the first floor because of equipment,
That has been the
right?
requirement because of the equipment,
Because
yes.
of the equipment.
Yes.
And we wouldn't want them on the first floor. We'd want some other public safe facing, like the clerk's office or something like that.
Yes.
Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah, that is the thought process, and that is how they came out of the new building. For this, and some of the reasons that Greg brought up also about prominent real estate in the new building, if that much of it was taken up by this, and a large portion of that storage did not seem like the best use of space. And again, this test fit was simply that this is a building that we have access to. Other options of other locations, a lot of them have been thrown around by that department, and this to try to explore This was just one that we were asked if that building, with COFA moving out of there, if that building's available, would they fit? And this diagram was just a look at if they would fit. But again, if they're not in a new building, any location, we can do the same test fits.
Mike?
I'm glad to hear that we're looking at this, and I guess I don't totally agree with Greg. I don't think the city needs to have a big box apartment building on every block, and I don't think having some surface parking is not a good thing. Yeah, you can generate more money with vertical sprawl, but you also have all the problems that come along with it. I just think a city should have a variation in the kind of buildings and uses that it has, not just all. We've seen the commons in that area, and I wasn't the one who said this, but they said the City of Ithaca has lost its soul, and I think it's true with the eclectic bigger buildings and things. So I don't know. I think it's perfectly all right to look at this, and whether we'll end up going ahead and doing something different on that block and with our parking lot there, I don't know, but it's fine to look at it.
I see Amanda Champion's online. Amanda, would you like to comment?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for all of this. It's great to listen to it. I just want to say specifically about this, I actually love this because there's parking, and the problem right now with going to the Board of Elections is there's nowhere to park, and that is one of the biggest departments that needs parking for constituents. We could have, several designated spots in our parking lot right there, and if they fit into this building, and I think that's a great use for it. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Greg, did you have a comment?
Yeah, the parking at the Human Service Annex is already essentially assigned for staff and staff at the DSS building as well, overflow parking. So in terms of public parking spaces in the lot, there's really none. It's street parking out front and on the side of the building, correct, for visitors to COFA currently. Right. So this wouldn't provide any different of a solution for access from the public aside from what we have now in front of the Board of Elections, which is street parking. Because one of the issues with this space all along has been the past practice that we've given parking spaces in somewhat of a proximity to our employees. So I don't know how that would change. It doesn't seem like there's any more public parking in this space than the current situation for the Board of Elections. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, that would be a correct assumption, because you're looking at just the fit of this space with everything being equal, so yeah.
Well, thank you for that option. I like the idea of not having more elections in the new building and finding the right spot for them, and this might be it. I tend to lean more towards Greg on this one. We're actually going to have we're going to invite the Downtown Ithaca Business Group, is the association, is that what's?
Ithaca Alliance, the DIA.
Yeah, they're going to come to a future downtown facilities meeting just to talk about their thoughts on things and get their feedback. But thanks for that.
So, I mean, we asked the question before we considered a test fit here. Do you know when a decision, or if a decision has been made about the future of that building? Because it would be helpful, at least timeline, when a decision would be made, because if not, then we've got to start looking for, permanent space for that program.
No decision has been made here or by the legislature, other than we determined that it wasn't for sale a year ago, I believe.
Okay.
But I'm not sure where it's going from here. So.
Because one of the things that we will talk about, but the Board of Elections, at least the offices, is currently in Building C. So as we move forward with the deconstruction plans, we are looking at relocating those programs. So, I mean, there's two options: either moving the offices temporarily to space where we would lease it, or permanently to, where they would be permanently. They can't be there permanently right now. That's 4 years away. But if this is not going to be a viable option, we can start exploring a permanent option for them if it's not at this location. So that's why, however or whenever this decision is made, it will be very helpful. I think we've got still some time to do that, but we are looking, as of course indicated earlier, at lease space where we can put the programs that are currently at Building C, at least during the deconstruction and construction phases.
Annie?
Yeah, just to build off what you said about, we didn't, if I remember correctly, that we didn't say this property was for sale, putting it, up for sale, but we, I believe still, we're open to considering, combining it with some other properties to help make, what they often call a transformative project on that block. So I guess we need to look at the process of figuring this out.
And two of those buildings are past their life expectancy anyways of one of the current owners, and I'm not sure how old the old carpet building is that we're using there now. So, yeah, and it's a one-story building. And so
we did gut it when we renovated it back in 2014. So we did gut it. We did not replace the roof because it was only 5 years old, I think, at the time. But yeah, I mean, but it's held up really well.
It's a nice
for a
space.
building that's
nice space.
11 years old. It's in very good condition. I mean, the renovation.
11 years old.
The renovation. The
renovation is 11 years old, and
yeah.
And do you know how old the building is offhand?
I can't remember now.
Okay. So the renovation is 11. The roof is about 16 years old.
Yeah. It's a PVC roof.
Is there planned a basement for the new building?
That has not been determined yet. Again, we mentioned earlier, there's parking we may have to address. There is mechanicals. We haven't gotten deep enough into that to know any of the systems. So at this point, we are not factoring that in. It may come into play down the road if it's required.
Thank you. I was just thinking about storages also.
I mean, there may be a sort of easy decision and then a harder decision relative to Board of Elections. The sooner we can get confirmation that Board of Elections will not be in the new building, we can start design of the new building. So we're sort of positioned right now to actually start schematic design early. We could start as early as next Monday, assuming that, we have approval of the program that will go in that new building. The longer term decision might be if they're not in the human service annex building, looking at other options and test fitting them. We could sort of get a green light if there was a decision or agreement on whether or not they would be in the new building. And I think independent of that conversation, that would allow us to move forward sort of on a critical path, and then we could continue to work on finding a home.
Mike?
I just wondered if they need that, we need to figure out how to do that quickly and make a decision on it. Would we do that next month at this meeting, or would we do it at a legislature meeting? We would need to have Board of Elections come and talk to us too.
Yeah, I'm thinking next month, but I think the full legislature's have to weigh in on this as well. We could also add it to the facilities meeting, which is sooner.
Yeah,
Right.
that's great.
Yep. So maybe we'll do that.
I mean, that's our recommendation, strongly supported by county administration, of course, has been involved in these discussions with us. I mean, in policy, the county administration makes all these space allocation decisions. We feel strongly this is a great recommendation. The program, Board of Elections, also does not want to be in the center of government. And so they're very supportive of either being at that location or elsewhere in the city. So we're letting you know, recommendation-wise, it's a strong recommendation from our part and from our team. And we hope that it gets that consideration by this committee and the full legislature.
Corsa?
Yeah, I think the next steps for us for this process is to bring in amended resolution for the one that was passed last year in terms of the space allocation. So we'll make a decision which committee to bring that resolution, the amended resolution to get it to the legislative chamber and get it moving forward so that they can start the process of figuring out what the design concept will be. And I think there's candidness around the Board of Election space. So the either or is either the Human Service Annex or a different building somewhere else. But what we want to communicate is that they will not fit in the center of government. So because of the previous resolution put them in the center of government, we need to amend that resolution to be able to move forward with the center of government project design so that if you feel that the Human Service Annex is not going to be utilized, then we will have the responsibility of identifying the alternative space.
Jordan, when's the next facilities meeting? Is that a week from Thursday?
Yes, third Thursday of the month.
So maybe the thing to do is to get that resolution in that meeting, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll try to do that.
Okay.
And that way it can come to the full legislature after that. Annie?
Yeah, just to recap, so we could pass a resolution about what's going to be in the center of government, still not being sure where a Board of Elections is going.
That's correct.
Right, okay, I concur with that.
Any other comments on that, or?
Randy, not on that, but there's something else that came to mind while we were talking here about leasing space, which we may have to do, which is fine, but I can remember back when we were building some of the other buildings that we had a discussion back in the old Public Works Committee about the cost of maintenance during construction. I'm talking about things like snow plowing and talking about lawn mowing and utilities and things like that. And we were told that once they had decided to have a capital project, that was all going to be folded into that. And I remember having a discussion about saying, you mean we're going to be paying over 30 years for the lawn mowing that's done now? And a lot of us didn't think that was a great idea. And I would think about the leasing costs too. They could argue that that's part of the capital project, but I would be in favor of making sure those things continue to be paid with current money, not with bond money.
I agree with that. Any more discussion on the Department Space Program update? Thank you for that. And if we get copies of that to distribute to the full legislature, it'd be great.
Yes. All right, the only other item that we had today was we've met with the ITS group to see what the temporary location for them and how we would work through that when we're tearing down the Annex C building and what they would do for the 4 years in between. I think that's actually... So I'll pull that up, and I'm going to let Kevin Terry from Tetra Tech give a quick outline of what it was we met and discussed.
Thank you, Mark. Bernard, Kevin Terry with Tetra Tech. We're the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, telecommunications sub-consultant to Holt for the project. So as Bernard said, we've been meeting now, I think it's for probably over about a month with county IT, with facilities, looking at options for relocation of the IT server room from the Annex C building. As we talked about earlier, that plan is to have deconstruction occur on that later this year, early next year. So that is definitely a key thing for us to work and figure out. So meeting with the various county IT folks, looking at different options, we've come up with what we think is a pretty pretty sound solution that works both for the short term and then for the long term once the new building is built, which would consist of relocating the current IT server room for the county, for the downtown portion, from the Annex C over to the old jail building. So it sounds like we would have space available over there. There will be some improvements that we would need to do from a electrical and from a HVAC standpoint, and we're still in the process of working through what that would be to complete the evaluation. We've met with the county's vendor, First Light, who provides the fiber optic to the Annex C building currently, and they've been great to work with. And they have put forth a conceptual plan where they would provide a aerial run. Right now, it comes in from a utility pole outside the Annex C building. They would kind of extend that around the block, going down Tioga and then back over to the jail. It would be a 48-strand fiber optic cable, so that we could relocate the IT server equipment over there and make a connection. And it sounds like, and again, all these details still are being finalized, but it sounds like that could be a pretty smooth transition that could occur over a weekend. And First Light right now has a price tag of between $10,000 to $15,000 to provide that overhead fiber optic from Annex C around to the jail building. Once the new building is up and everything ready, we would be able to use that same connection point to connect back into the new building, the new Center of Government building where the IT server would be. So I think we've got a great solution. Again, working through some of the final details, and we can definitely share more on those. So.
Yeah, I'll just add, from a project perspective, this is as much of a win as the SHPO situation. We had initially thought that we might be in a situation where we're moving IT one time, where I think you remember there were conversations about keeping Annex C in place until the new building was constructed, or 2/3 of it, move them over to the new building, and then we tear down Annex C and finish the new building. Logistically and from a cost perspective, the $15,000 of this fiber run is like pennies compared to the complexity and logistics of moving the IT one time. So working really closely with, county IT, they've been fantastic, and we've come to a great solution that sort of gets us out of all that logistics and cost associated with a 2-phase construction of new center government.
Any questions on that from anybody? Annie?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just having trouble following this. So the departments on the 3rd floor now of the old jail would move over to the mental health building temporarily.
Yeah, so
IT would move over.
Yeah, so currently we have the county admin and county attorney on the 3rd floor of the old jail. One of the biggest inconvenience of this move is the family court representation by the attorney in the county attorney's office. So there's going to be the requirement for us to do some degree of adjustment, working together with HR to see what will be, how do we make sure we can free up the 3rd floor to accommodate this action, and also provide efficiency for the program, and especially for the family court representation. So these are some of the programmatic processes administration need to go through to make sure we're able to get our work done, and also provide the opportunity, especially for the family court presentation from the county attorney's office, being closer to the courthouse. But our goal is to be able to vacate the 3rd floor and create that opportunity in terms of cost efficiency and program improvement for the process to be able to move forward. But yes, there's going to be significant inconvenience for many of us, but we also have to be flexible in working with a consultant and other department to be able to accommodate that inconvenience for a couple of years to be able to get the project moving.
Annie, go ahead.
Well, thank you for considering moving, and, as part of this, I know it's a big inconvenience. And so then you said the overhead wires, so they would go from ITS now to the current building, over to the old jail?
Correct, yeah, they would go from the Annex C building, where it is currently coming in. It would go up the street, run down Tioga Street, past the courthouse, and then back down and over to the old jail. So along the street, kind of around the block.
So it would go that way, come around?
Yeah, I got to get my bearings where we are, right? It'll go that way around, correct.
Overhead?
Utility poles.
Okay, so it would go.
Existing utility poles,
So it would go
correct.
out, so it would go out to the street, or be out at the street in front of Annex C.
Correct.
Come around to come here, and then after construction,
Just move back.
okay.
After construction, then they'll tie in back over at the center government building, based on exactly where the server room ends up being in that new building, which isn't determined yet, but.
And the advantage to this is that the site during construction, that now being routed by the street, there is nothing across the site. Currently, they're tied in across our site. So that clears that up for the construction, so it won't have to be touched or rerouted.
It's out of the way of the site because they're on the street,
Yes.
but you still be able to get equipment in, even with,
It's already power lines that are there.
so you have to get
Yeah.
under them anyway
Correct.
Yes.
for the construction. Okay, thank you.
So remind me who is planning to go to the third floor once the whole project is done? Because IT would have to move out, and then you're going to have to, is that where assigned counsel is supposed to go?
Correct.
Okay, so then you have to renovate that space.
Right, but they're currently leasing, so that makes that pretty easy. I mean, sorry, assigned counsel.
Great.
So once, and they would continue to lease because, as you know, schedule-wise, once we vacate the old jail, we would go back and renovate that.
Right.
So it's going to be at some point later in 2029 that then assigned counsel would move into the building and the other program that I mentioned earlier, workforce development and DOL. So, I mean, it works well that those are currently departments that are leasing space.
Right. Yeah, good thought. Any more questions on that? Anybody? That's a lot. You guys need more.
Can I throw something into the mix?
Yes, please.
In terms of use of the mental health building, there is virtually no free parking in that area. And we've talked about parking over here still and going to the mental health building, which is approximately half a mile, which may be okay for some, but a significant hardship for others.
You know, I was at a meeting in that building last night, actually. So I walked all around it, and I walked around the library as well. And I was confused by what the county really owns there and where the parking is and open spaces and whatnot. And so it appeared to me there might be some more spaces available there, but I could be completely wrong about how it's set up. It looked to me like there were some areas that didn't need to have like the awning that goes in back. There could be more parking generated there, but that's a separate issue. I just think it's something we should look at, so. And other things.
Randy?
Any?
Suggestions for that? You said for some people that, going half a mile and
There are
depending on the
two-
weather too.
Yeah, there are two large city-owned garages in the immediate proximity to that area. And so my thought is to work something out with the city on that because the Tioga Street garage in particular, at least in my experience, has not been full.
What do we do for employees that work in the mental health building right now?
So at the moment, I think they are the only employees that are not issued with parking passes. So those are some of it's a bigger conversation that we would need to have. But I think pretty much at the moment they have a very limited amount of parking space that they are assigned to those staff, and most of them find their own parking spaces. So it's something that we going to figure out in the bigger conversations. I have some few issues regarding that we're trying to deal with. So it's a bit more complex, and there's some
good luck
degree of
with that.
nuances around it.
And if you guys need to leave early to start packing,
We will move first, so to make it easier for others to feel comfortable moving as well, so.
Yes, Mike?
Just that there is probably leasable space around. Corsa mentioned the TC3 building, that they've been leasing some space there, the foundation. Also, very close to us is 200 East Court, is it? And that building often has for rent signs up. So there might be available space, and that's a fairly modern building.
Yes, we are evaluating all those options in terms of the best use approach. So, yes, assessment will need to relocate. IT, we've already talked about IT, Board of Election, we've already talked about that. And various permutations and decision points will need to be made administratively in terms of what will be the best use of our resources and means. So those decision points will be coming to you guys for concurrence so that we can move forward. But yes, we will have to lease spaces. We've already spoken with TC3. They're excited to work with us to provide us. I think there's 2 floors available in that building. You also have the 5th floor of the mental health building. And as Ariel indicated, if there's a support to use honest, do we wait to move Board of Election later because we have to renew the lease for where the equipments are right now? Or do we relocate COFA and veterans so that we can permanently house them there and they don't have to move again? So there's a lot of permutation that is going to go on with the decision-making points, but every single department or most departments that are going to be moving to the central government, there's going to be some degree of inconvenience that we should be flexible enough to accommodate so that we'll be able to get a project done. And I'm hoping that as we start having the direct conversation with the department that will be affected or will be required to move on short notice, we can at least be flexible enough to accommodate the change that is coming.
Greg?
In our project budget, are we accounting for moving costs and relocation and rental space for relocation? Is that, do we have a number there yet, or is that plus?
I mean, typically we do include that. It may not, as Michael was indicated earlier, typically we wouldn't bond those costs, but they're considered project costs, correct?
But we have a number set aside in a spreadsheet somewhere where we're anticipating some sort of expense?
We have very rough numbers, but very old numbers, but those are ones that we're going to be refining now that we are looking at potential locations and getting what their lease rates are. Okay. And then once we make a decision or make a recommendation, we'll come back with those costs will be for how long.
So we'll know what that is at a decision point?
Yes.
Okay. All right, great, thank you. I know everything's constantly in motion.
Yeah.
Of course, I believe that we reserved $9 million in our capital budget for this project. If needed, could money be used out of that budget to pay for some of the actual other expenses? Or does it have to be for the construction project alone?
I presume so, because I think everything related to the central government project can be charged to the capital budget. So including this construction, including reallocation, all those are quantified as part of our central government cost. So yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think the IT solution is a good solution. Thank you. Very methodical how you guys have worked through this. I appreciate it. But any other questions on IT relocation?
Yeah. All right. So program. Oh, I'm sorry. What's that?
The only thing left on my agenda, unless you have something on IT you want to talk about, is the community engagement discussion.
So I'm going to let Quay talk about this.
Yeah, if you want to pull up the slides. This is where the project sort of starts to get fun and starts to get real, and we start to design. There are two main goals that we have as designers from the perspective of community engagement. One is obviously collecting information and data and opinions and thoughts and considerations from the different communities that we're going to be engaging with. The other main goal is just to sort of build some type of civic ownership and sort of get the community involved in supporting the project. So I really see this as a collaboration between the design team and the legislature. So one of the things that I'd ask you to think about is there a small group or a team of, from the legislature body that would like to be involved in this community engagement process? I think that, from my perspective, like this is really a key moment of collaboration between the design team and the entire legislature. From that perspective, if you wanted to, I know that we're sort of running over your meeting, we could wrap up there, or I could, try to give a quick summary of what we're thinking community engagement might look like. But also, this is just a really preliminary draft, because I think the actual community engagement process needs to be that collaboration between design and legislature. I'm happy to give a quick summary if you'd like.
Yeah, Mike?
Just want to say, before we go to the public, I think we need to have some kind of a concept of what the building might look like, or the uses, the access, the parking, and all those kinds of things. I don't want to go into sooner, otherwise we're just going to hear a wish list, and that may not be something we can accommodate.
No, that's a great point, Mike. It is. I'm happy. Maybe I'll talk through what we're thinking, and then we can get feedback. So just on the screen right now are some of our specific goals: promote transparency and trust, capture resident priorities, ensure inclusive representation. This surface operational pain points is a topic about what are some of the frustrations now. We want to make sure we're solving them. We want to sort of from the perspective of the residents of the communities, how are they going to measure success of the project? If we can get that feedback now, we can begin to design towards success in everyone's eyes. Test accessible strategies, has to do with ADA accessibility, but it also has to do with how residents are getting to the building, and start collect some information from them regarding, public transportation, walking, biking, parking, build civic ownership, and then clarify the success metrics. So these are some of the things that, we'll attack. We're thinking in the context of 3 meetings. So if you can go to the next slide, but, specifically to Mike's point, we were actually thinking, but again, this is a collaboration. We were thinking that we do go out early with the first meeting, and we talk about process. We talk about, this first meeting is review the existing conditions. What are all the county departments? I bet at this initial presentation, a lot of residents might not know all of the departments and all of the resources available to them through the county. But where are they? Show them how they're distributed around the city. Talk about the project vision and scope. Talk about the vision, what we're trying to solve and how we're thinking about solving it. We talk about the engagement roadmap, the process that we'll use over the course of 3, however many meetings to engage them, but then also talk about the whole project roadmap. Let the community know, in these workshops, in these town hall meetings, this is a 2019. We're going out to 2029 in terms of the project. We're thinking that there will be some interactive polling where we're collecting some really early information that will inform even early design, and then a Q&A, and then talk about next steps. But with the initial engagement, we were thinking that we would go out before we have anything on paper, so that when we go back to them in the second meeting, possibly with multiple options, we can talk about how their feedback sort of created these various options, and then in the third meeting, how their feedback from the multiple options that we presented led to the final solution. The third meeting would be collecting information from them. We were debating, does it make sense for the first meeting of engagement to be, in each municipality, maybe with a different legislature representative hearing, from their community and rolling out what the project is, or we could do it at one location, with everyone much more efficiently. The second meeting then, on the next slide, we were thinking it was a multiple option meeting. We'll come to the, project team and then to the legislature and then the community, so we won't be presenting things that, you know, you're not comfortable presenting, but share the multiple options, talk about pros and cons, but the important thing is collecting their feedback on pros and cons too. So we're really trying to be transparent and open about, like, these are options that are on the table. Do you have thoughts that we might not be considering that from your perspective are worth thinking about, so we make the right decisions moving forward? And then the third meeting, we would go back and talk about what we present to them, remind them what we heard, you know, in the multiple option meeting, and present the sort of the final option, but it would be the final option for their additional input as it continues to develop. But to your point, Mike, working with a small group of legislatures, sort of a team that's a collaboration between the design team and the legislature, how do we want to roll this out, you know, to the different municipalities in the community in a way that they really do feel like they're sort of heard and they're developing some level of ownership in the project?
Annie?
Yeah, I like the idea that you've described, you know, the format here. I know working in my communities with different projects, the sooner you can get out there to find out what the needs are. I mean, we're by definition, our government is to serve the people, and to serve their needs. So the sooner we get out there, and I've seen this with other projects, the less pushback you're going to have, because later on they're going to say, well, you didn't consider this and this. And if we just do that from the beginning, you know, it not only creates less pushback, but it gets their needs met and heard, you know, and we meet as many as we can, you know, kind of serving as our basis for what we're doing. So I've seen this work very, very well. And I know some lessons from talking with different developers. The more you can get out there on the ground first is better overall.
Yeah.
I'm happy to work on a group like that.
Great.
I was going to mention something. So this was something that the legislature over a year ago, at least this committee, wanted included in the scope of work for the services. So when we put the RFQ, request for qualifications, out to the consultants, we had a piece that said providing opportunities for meaningful participation from all community members. And so we didn't really discuss how that would look. And so that's why we bring it here. This is one option of how we could engage with the community. I think the question that I've had is, you know, do we go out to all the various municipalities? Do we have it more centralized and invite all of them? Obviously, the first one is a lot more meetings. And so we wanted to get some feedback, at least along those lines and in general regarding this approach.
Mike?
It seems to me that initially it really ought to just be a central meeting. If we could get space at the town hall in the town of Ithaca, that would probably be a space to hold a meeting or something. I can't think of any other that large similar.
I don't know if the Rice conference room is, I haven't been to town hall in quite a while, so I'm not sure if
That's not going to get a lot of your downtown people,
yeah,
though.
that's true.
But that would be what the group would work on and talk about, is how to go about it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Greg, you have a comment?
Yeah, I understand that multiple meetings is hard, and we've sort of seen the success we've had with satellite meetings can be kind of low. I guess the challenge that I would say is we need to make sure that we're hearing from Groton and Newfield and Trumansburg and, all of corners of the county. So if we can do that in one location, great. But if we're unsuccessful in meeting those constituents somewhere, then I think we need to retool and make sure that we have outreach, or if it's a strong outreach to local town boards or village boards or whatever the case may be. But there needs to be some work to bring people together. But I think it's not just about the city of Ithaca and the town of Ithaca for this project. And we need to make sure that we're addressing the 70,000 other people in the county.
Right, and that's why we're bringing it up.
Yeah.
What you envision.
So I don't know if satellite, I guess my point, I don't know if a satellite meeting makes sense, or if it's maybe we could ask some of the town boards for some, for some time before or after. I don't know what the right solution is. It takes some creativity.
Right.
But we've often not seen a lot of success with nodal sort of separate meetings.
We have for some things, like, I'm trying to remember which ones. For the planning department, for certain things, you've gone out to different areas, and so they have figured out how to get people in, so maybe we can consult with them on how to do it, and they've already connected, with their town boards. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I think transparency is really important. I think that one initial meeting seems to be a place to start for me. As far as the small group, I think it should include people other than just legislators, maybe some staff, and maybe Corsa, you can come up with some people you feel that should be part of that discussion and their outreach on that. Transparency, I agree, is really important. I think it starts with deconstruction. So there's a lot of people who are going to be focused on that, probably more than the building of the project itself, I think. I'm not sure how much people in Newfield care about this building being built. I've shared this information with the town boards many, many times, and never gotten a question on it. But I think that transparency needs to be really important. I think we can start just with one meeting. I like the idea of the Ithaca Town Hall is an option for us, but also the people that are being directly impacted. Those people really need to be notified of what's going on with this project. But that's my thought. Annie?
So it sounds like we need to get, if we're going to have some staff members and some legislators, I'd be willing to, to be one of those folks too.
So Mike and Annie would be part of that group. I'd like to see, get your thoughts on this course. I think it's not just legislators, people who are actually, working with the public as well. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think as Ann said, we're working very close with planning, and planning will be a significant part of that conversation in terms of how we stage any public engagement. So yes, staff will be involved, and as I said, there's a lot of moving pieces with the staff space needs and expectation and things like that, and all of those factors, all those communications need to be part of our public engagement approach as well. So.
And when we do this meeting, I think we should provide the option for everybody to attend online, of course. We can notify a lot of people. So hopefully we get, 50 people to show up on that. But
I just want to leave it open because it sounds like now we're directing the group. So if we're going to get some people together to figure this out, I just still want to leave it open that we haven't decided there's going to be one meeting to start. We could decide we're going to go out to the community first.
Yep.
Just. And I wasn't meaning like, Department of Planning, had to help us, but I know they certainly have experience doing this.
They are integral part of the project itself, with all from initial stage until we cut the sod for commissioning. So yes, they'll be part of it.
I said one quick question. So with Mike and Ann on the committee, once we have that, sort of subcommittee meeting, will we be able to sort of roll right into the community engagement process, or should we come back to this group for approval to begin that process?
I think I'd like to come back to this group, get together. Corsa and Annie and Mike are going to be part of the legislators, part of this. Whoever we're going to get, maybe they can get together and discuss this with Holt and present at our next downtown facilities meeting. Does that work for people, or is that soon enough, or that's a month from now? If you want to start quicker, then we can work on that.
It would be great if we could start quicker.
Okay. Would you guys want to get together quicker and with the group and
Put some dates on my calendar. I'll be glad to try.
Yeah, and I'm sorry we couldn't bring it to you earlier, but we didn't want to start this process until we knew that we had a site we were building on.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Anybody in the planning, sustainability department want to take the lead on this?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
maybe, of course, you can identify the other people then, and then we'll set up a time as quickly as possible.
We should bring in our public information department, too.
Right.
Yep, good idea. Good idea. Any questions or comments on community engagement at all? Okay. Is there anything else anybody wants to discuss? Go ahead, Corsa. Jump right in.
I just want to say one final thought process. Been here for 3.5 months. I think I want to thank Quay and his group, Ariel, and planning, with everybody working day and night, getting emails from Megan in the middle of the night at 10 p.m. about where we are with things. There is a lot of work going on in the project at the moment, and we are at a point whereby we need to have that clarity of direction where we are going with the project. A lot of time and money is being spent right now, so we need to have clarity in terms of our project approach, in terms for us to be able to meet the 2029 deadline or projected timeline for the project. We need to have clarity from legislatures that this is the direction we are moving in. We are building our center of government, and these are the processes that are just not ticking boxes, but actually moving towards construction and deconstruction of the existing buildings. So we need to have clarity from legislators as we move forward with the project, so that we are not derailed in our approach, in our timelines, and also we are not looking at anything else if this is the commitment of what we're doing, and then we can focus on one singular approach and move forward with it.
So would if we got a resolution in front of the legislature in our second meeting about the re-updating the resolution about which departments are going to this new building, is that the most important step?
That is significant, and also a clarity in terms of resolution directing us to move forward with the project. Being new, there's a lot of conversation in my ears from staff, from various corners in terms of what we are doing and our approach in the project development time cycle. And my hope is to be able to really focus on the project as we move forward with it. We are going to have issues in terms of planning and, as Quay said, working with the state and the slowness of it. But if we have clarity that the project is a goal and we're doing this, and then we have clarity in terms of our approach and time that we spent and the commitment we are making through the project development cycle.
Well, as you know, we have not approved this, right? We haven't approved any money other than budgeting so far. And we don't have a number, and I think that number is going to be important for people to vote on. So I think that's going to be the big hurdle there. But knowing what departments are going into this building, I think is critical for you to come up with some kind of number.
Design and then number, right?
Right. Yeah. And you're right. A lot of work's been put into this, and we haven't decided, so we need to. So. All right, if there's nothing else, thank you very much for coming. A lot of information, a lot of progress. I appreciate it. We've come a long way. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And we're adjourned.